I am going to record today's session, so thank you very much for joining us today for our ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE webinar. We're very excited that you've joined us, so thanks again. My name is Sarah Scheinhorn. I'm an account executive here with ISG Solutions, and I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'll turn the presentation over to Teresa Porco, who will present the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. I promise this will be a short intro and only a few slides in all. Before we get started, we'll take care of a few housekeeping items. I have muted all of the lines just to cut down on background noise. However, of course, we do welcome any questions you have. You have a couple different options to ask questions. On the right-hand side, I think it's on the right-hand side, of your screen, you should see an orange, or actually you should see your control panel for Zoom. You can either click the raise your hand button and I can unmute you at the end of the presentation to ask your question, or you can simply type it in the question and answer pane. And I'll be happy to read that aloud for you and to answer the question. Again, though, I want to make sure you understand we really do want questions, so please feel free to ask any questions. We're happy to answer them. So just a brief background information about the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE and ISG in general. We've been in business since 1995, and we've been working with Advanced Solutions International, the developers of IMIS, since IMIS's inception, really since the beginning. So we've worked with clients for many years and on many, many, many different versions of IMIS, including the latest version, IMIS 2017. Most of our clients have always relied heavily on Crystal Reports. Really, for a long time, they've made a great investment in Crystal Reports, both with time and their money as well. So with the evolution of RiSE, many of our clients would really like to access IMIS on the staff site. However, Crystal Reports didn't render online, and so our clients were really struggling to find ways to replace their many critical reports, either with IQA or SSRS. So as concern grew with our clients, we put our heads together here at ISG and we came up with a solution which our certified IMIS extension developers have created, and that's the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. So Teresa will show you in a moment. It's really a very simple and great way to view and run your Crystal Reports from any RiSE site. So it could be from a staff site or a member site as well. So we do have several clients using this already and really having a lot of success and very excited to not have to replace all their Crystal Reports. So at this point, I'm just going to go over, I promise, just a couple of slides, and then I'll turn it over to Teresa. Just a little background. Really, there's about 3 easy steps when using the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. You upload your Crystal Reports to RiSE. There is an admin iPart, a Crystal Report Viewer admin iPart, that allows you to upload your Crystal Reports. Again, as I mentioned, it can be on any RiSE page or site, so it can be staff sites or public sites. And that's when you insert the ISG Crystal Report Viewer iPart itself, and then you're able to run the reports. It's really that simple. So at this point, and one thing to note, and Teresa will certainly show this, you are able to download or print your reports. You can save them. So there's a lot of flexibility here. So at this point, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to Teresa, and she will show you and wow you with the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. All right, Teresa, are you ready?
Yes, Sarah, can you see my screen?
I can. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE demo. What we are going to be seeing today is actually a live action demo using one of our test public sites as well as our test database. Now, before we get into the actual configuration behind the reports, I want to go into a sample database or a sample website. And this looks like your typical generic RiSE site. And you'll notice in this top navigation, I have a navigation item called Crystal Viewer. When it comes to running your Crystal Reports from a RiSE site, you can embed them as a button. You can embed them as a navigation item. There are just the functionality is the only limit is RiSE itself. So if you can configure it in RiSE, then you can actually get a report to run from that area. So here in the Crystal Reports Viewer header, I have my first report. What we're going to be covering today is a different variety of reports. One will be just a simple run the report and there's your results. One will prompt for a simple parameter, and then we'll get a little more complicated. We'll get into exporting and printing and things like that. So starting with this simple report, this is just a generic record count by member type. when you click on this report, what it's doing is it's actually sending a report request to the IMS database, and it's saying, okay, here's my report, here are my criteria, can you go ahead and return my results? Now, this report, if I'd run it in Crystal itself, this would be how it would look. But this is how it's actually running from the RiSE site. This is a sample of what might be, for instance, an executive report. Your president, they don't want to have to go through and enter parameters and worry about those details. They want to click a button and get their results. So this is a sample of a report that everything is pre-configured. All they have to do is click on that button and there's their information. In the left-hand navigation of this report, you'll see that we have a couple of options here. The first option is to print. So from here, your executives could click on this print button and it would be sent to the default printer. Another option here is an option to export. In the export options, you have all of the same export functionality that you have using a Crystal report from the IMS desktop. The difference here is that these reports, you can actually focus or target the type of exports so that your users aren't exporting to something that's going to be useless to them. So for instance, for this report, because it is a report that would look best on a page or exported to Excel, I have actually targeted this report to say only offer these export options. You have additional options like exporting to CSV, HTML pages, all of the different functionality you have in your regular Crystal reports you have available here. But using this first sample, I'm going to export to PDF. I can select my all pages or a certain set of pages, but then from here, I click on the export button, and just like that, there's my report. It is saved in my download folder, so I can move it to somewhere else, I can manipulate it, I can do whatever I need because the report is now on my local machine. And that is how simple and quick it was to be able to run and download this report. Now, the second report has a little more detail. This report, when you click on it, it pops up and says, I need parameters. So this is actually a dues letter report, and this report has the parameter options hard-coded. Depending on your organization, you might want to say only offer, for instance, status, active or inactive. You have other status options, but you only want to allow them to pick from those two. So you can actually hard code your predefined options in this report or in the Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE so that your users have to pick from that list versus try to go in and enter something that's incorrect that they're not going to be able to work with. In this scenario, I have 3 values hard-coded. What we're seeing on the screen is we're seeing a display value. When the report is run, the report is actually sent a code. But for our purposes, the users aren't going to know that CM1 is company member level 1 or company member. So we're going to pass the code to the report, but your users are going to be able to pick this display item. Once I've selected my value, I select execute. And within seconds, here's my report. You'll also see up here in the top navigation, I have a new option. I can go from page to page. So if I wanted to take a look at my report and say, you know what, it looks like my logo is a little cut off, or I need to modify the signature, it's an old signature, you can actually see it before you export it. But over here in these options, before I had an option to export to Excel because the report we ran the first time was an export compatible or an Excel compatible export report. This one is not. So I only get the options for PDF and for Word because those are the values or the report types that are compatible for this report. I click on my export to Word. I click on the run. And just like that, here's my report. And I go into my edit mode. And I can see here's my logo. Here's my signature. So if there's one minor thing you want to change Chuck to Charles, you could modify it on this report. But this is the report that was just run from RiSE right on my machine. The third report I'm going to run is actually an export report. This report is a report that is a little different from the previous two. This one is actually using an IQA query to provide predefined options for the users to pick from. So what that means is that if you can develop an IQA query to generate a list of results, you can actually point your report parameter to that IQA query. That means you don't have to maintain a list of values in the report. You don't have to update it every couple of years. The users don't have to go in and type in or potentially put in the wrong code and get the wrong information. This report is looking at an IQA query that's saying, show me all of my events with an active status. Now that I've got this events with the active status, I can come in here and I can pick, we'll do Leadership Summit. Here we have an option for include canceled. This is one of those options that's hard-coded. It is pointing to a checkbox. The checkbox defaults to yes or no. So here I can say, include canceled or don't include canceled. Now, you'll notice that it defaulted to the value of no. That means that I have actually said most of the time users are going to pick no on this option. So I'm going to default to that so that it's one less value that your users have to click through when they run the report. Now, I'm going to warn you, this report is not pretty. I'm a data person. So when I run this report, I want to see data. I don't care that it's an ugly format. I want to see data. Now, you'll notice up here, I have not presented the print button, and I have not presented the page display button because they're not worthwhile here. This option, this report is only allowed to be exported. And in my export options, I have my export to Excel. I could also add export to CSV if I wanted to. I can limit the pages, but again, I click on export, and just like that, here is my data. And I go into my edit option, and in just a few seconds, here is my information in an Excel file that I can manipulate, modify, do whatever I need to. Now, the last report, don't save, is that we're going to take a look at today, unless we've got some really big data people. This report is actually prompting, and the main reason I pulled this report is because we've also got date values. So if you want to be able to limit the registration date information by, and this is a test database, so we have to be pretty broad with our results. We're going to look at our Leadership Summit. We now have these date values. You can do as a range. You can do as a start and end date or a date between start and end. We have our option for canceled or not. But when we run this report, in just a few seconds, here's our report. Now, we didn't get much data for this report, so I'd have to expand the parameters, and then we could actually go through and see multiple pages and things like that. But if you want to see who's registered in the last week, you can actually go through and do a report just like that. Your staff can do it. You could actually set it up for your vendors, depending on what rights. You have all the regular security parameters that you have through RiSE, you can set up on these reports. Now, this last report, I'm not going to run it unless somebody asks me to. It actually is calling a stored procedure. It is a very simple stored procedure that says, if your last name is Smith, then change your middle name to Megan or Reagan. So what you would do is you would actually click on the report, you would enter the last name, and then you would enter the new middle name, and I'll go ahead and run it. Doesn't hurt anything. And I'm going to say Linda. So when I execute this report is actually calling the database, calling a stored procedure and saying, okay, I must find every record with the last name of Smith and now change the middle name for that record to Linda. So I just updated every record in the database with the last name of Smith and changed the middle name to Linda. For regular life, that's not a really good thing to do, but for a sample, it's a quick way to say, you know what, you can run stored procedures just like that using Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE. The next option we have is a sample of running the report through an actual RiSE staff page. This is a sample of a record in RiSE, and this report's a little different. This is not a report I developed. This is actually a copy of an ASI standard report that I took. I added one parameter to. And I said, parameter, I need you to go into the URL field or the URL of the record, the URL of the page, and I want you to find the ID. So when somebody clicks on a report, pluck the ID from that URL and return this report for that record. You can pull one value from the URL, you could pull 10 values from the URL. So for instance, if you had your event code and your function code and your state, you could actually pull all three of those from the URL, and the report would receive them. And when it ran, it would actually generate the results. So many of you may recognize this report. This is the old standard ASI profile report that you can run from the IMAS desktop. So literally all I did was add that one parameter to say, when you run it, pull that ID from the URL. That's all I had to do to take that ASI standard report and incorporate it into the RiSE site. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is when you go through and you upload a report to Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE, one of the things that happens is that the report reader goes through and says, here are all the parameters in your report. And you have the option to either map the parameters or leave them, for instance, if it's a sub-report parameter, it's being fed by the main report. So you can either let that be mapped by itself, or you can actually pass the parameters in the setup. It's a little backwards, but what we're going to go into now is we're actually going to go in and take a look at some of these reports. And the reason I bring that information up about passing those parameters is I'm going to take a look at this report that I just ran from Crystal Viewer Profile that pulled only this ID. If any of you have ever tried to modify that report or look at that report, you'll know that it's fairly complicated in its parameters. But when I uploaded this report, the Crystal Report Reader recognized all of these parameters: address parameter 2, report title, major key. It recognized everything, but the only thing I had to do is I had to pass the ID value from that URL. Everything else is actually rendered down into the report based on that ID value. So that is a complicated ASI standard report that literally all I had to do was add that ID parameter and then have the Crystal Report Viewer pass that ID in to make that report completely, or make it useful for our site. Now, if you like to go through and pass ASI parameters, all of these parameters have been configured in the Crystal Report Viewer. You'll see here where it says, click here to see variable help. All of these are the variables that you actually see right there. So if I scroll down and I go into, let's see, member control address 1. So, or I'm sorry, let's do address 2. Where'd it go? Member control address 2. That's the address 2 prompt that you're seeing just to the left where it's grayed out. So if you actually wanted to go through and map those parameters, you would have the option to. You could either use that variable to look for them, or you could actually come in here and do bracket. And you'll notice that it actually pops down with all the bracket options. I can type in member control, and then I find address 2 prompt. So, oh, I'm sorry, it was parameter, my bad. So you can actually go through and pass it to the report if you actually want to map all of those ASI standard parameters, or if you've gotten into the habit of using the ASI standard parameters. Personally, I like the idea of just passing that simple URL ID value to the report and let the report do its work. That's really the only thing in this sample the report needed to be able to run. So now that we kind of see a bit of a complicated report, all those parameters passed by ASI, and then us using just that simple one, let's kind of back up a bit and go through the process of adding a report. This is the Crystal Report Manager iPart. This iPart is where you actually go through, select, configure, or select, upload, and configure your reports. Simply, to add a report, you simply click on the plus sign, and I'm going to call this my December sample. And then this report code, the Crystal Reports Manager iPart uses the report code here, and it's actually matched with the Crystal Viewer iPart, so that this code is how the manager knows which report to pass to the iPart. We'll get to that in just 1 second. I just wanted to mention it. So here's our December sample. Here we have an option for categories. If you have, for instance, membership reports or reports that are good in membership and administration, you can actually create categories or tags for these reports so that they are designated for these working areas. One of the cool things about these tags is you can actually go through and build IQA queries that call these reports, and you can actually tell it, you know what, when somebody clicks on this section, go ahead and only show them finance reports, or only show them administration reports, executive reports. And that way your executives or your finance staff don't have to wade through 50 membership reports to get to their particular reports. They can actually go in and say, I want to focus on membership. and that would be the category that they're focusing on. You can add multiple categories here if you'd like, or you can just focus on that one category. For the comment and notes section, this is a place that is only stored or embedded in this report itself. So if you had to download the report, change the logo, and then upload the report again, you could actually add comments and notes so that 3 months from now, when Jerry goes and runs the report and says, wait a minute, what happened to my logo? I like the older one. There's a note that says, you know, hey, this was downloaded by Megan, updated, and then uploaded again, so that Jerry says, okay, now I know what happened. And, you know, there's history or there's information associated with these reports. Next, we have the upload new file. This is where we go and we actually select our reports. I am going to go ahead and use that letter of report that prompts for member type. And I click on upload. When I click on upload, it's actually going to read my parameters. And it's going to say, here's the parameter that I am looking for when this report is run. So here is where I can actually go through and I can say, I can pass it as an ASI standard parameter. I can go through and I can do my custom parameters because I don't want to use the ASI standard. But here I have additional options. I can go through and I can say, you know what? I'm going to hard code my text value. I'm going to let my users enter whatever they want. I'm going to give them a drop-down option. With this drop-down option, there's a couple options here. I can go through and I can hard code my source list, or I can tell it, you know what, call an IQA query. That way, I don't have to come in and update this report every 3 months when they add or remove a member type. The member types are perpetually provided by the IQA query that obviously runs whenever it's called, and it gives you the latest information. Here you have the prompt for when you run the report. Here you have a tooltip. So for instance, you could actually put in a value here that says, you know, when you enter, when you click on, when you select a member type, the member types will be passed to the report, et cetera, et cetera. This tooltip would actually show up when you float your mouse over the prompt when you run the report. Here you have those default value, the default value. So for instance, when I had that checkbox and I said, you know what, just default to no. That's what I wanted to see. Here you have an option to make a parameter required. You also have an option for read only. So for instance, if you wanted your users to only see active status, you could actually set up this parameter. They would see it as defaulting to active status, but they would not be able to edit it because that would violate the requirements for this report. For this sample, I'm going to go ahead and use my IQA query source. I've already defined my query, so all I have to do is go in and select and go into my Crystal Viewer report. Here is my predefined query. This is looking for records. I think it's looking for company records with is a company and is a member selected. So that actually goes through and says, okay, this is what I'm going to pass. You'll notice that my fields down here changed. Now I have my key field. These are the two values that are actually being passed by that IQA query. So if I were to run that query outside of Crystal Reports Viewer, I would actually see the member type in the description when I run that query. Now for my sample, my key field, I actually want to pass the member type to the report, but when my users run it, I want them to see the description. So again, John's not going to know that CM1 is corporate membership or company membership. He's going to see corporate membership so that he doesn't need to memorize all these codes. I save this. Now I create, and I have just uploaded a new report into Crystal Reports Viewer RiSE Manager. Right down here is my December sample. Now that I've got my report in RiSE, the next thing I need to do is I need to make a page to render it. So from here, it's going to start getting a lot more familiar. In the left-hand navigation, we go into RiSE, we go into our page builder, our manage content, and this is where we're going to go into our content items. You'll notice here we've got our record counts by member type, our event registrations. It's just what we're seeing right over here on the display page, but we're going to create a new content item for our new report. Simply go to the place where you want to save the report, click on New, Website Content. I'm going to call this my December sample. Oops. And then I am going to go through my Add Content Item. If I go into Custom, there is the Crystal Report Manager part, and here is the Crystal Report Viewer part. I click OK, and here is my part of the section where I go through and I configure my report for display. December sample. You'll remember that I was talking about that report code. I need to be able to tell it, go find that December sample report. Now, if I don't remember the code I gave it, I can actually type in the letter D, and it brings up all the reports that contain that value. I can expand and do DEC, and there's my December sample report. So this is actually telling the viewer, call the report manager, find this report, and let me run it. Now I have my options for display. You have an option to display it on the screen, which is what we're doing for our sample. We have the option to send it directly to PDF, Word, Excel, or HTML. So for instance, if this was a big report, instead of having it take up your computer, you can actually go through and say, you know what, send it directly to PDF, and then when it's done, it'll pop up in my download folder, and I'll be able to work with it from there. But don't bog down my machine while I'm waiting for it to render to display. So I can actually pick for display here. We have an option to enable the print. So this is where we're selecting the option to display the print button. The navigation is going from page 1, 2, 3, 4. Tree view. If you actually had a report where you could expand and shrink the subsections of the report, you have the ability to do that in the Crystal Viewer. Next, we have the option for enable to export. You'll notice that when we enable the export, we have a series of formats that we're allowed to export to. Now, for this sample, we're going to select PDF, and we're going to select Word, because those other formats aren't necessarily useful for the users that are going to run the report. But we do have those other export formats available for the users should they find that they need them. So I'll click OK here. And now you'll see that I have everything configured. I will save and publish. So I just went through and I just created a content display page to call my Crystal report, and everything is configured in it. I can actually click on this report now and I can run it. So from here, it's going through and saying, here's my report. Pick your member types. I'm going to pick regular member. And again, it's a test database. I haven't used this, so I don't know if there's anything. Oh, good, there is stuff in here. So here you can actually see our tree view. So if you wanted to expand or shrink, you would have that option here. You can go through and take a look at our second page, our third page. We have the option to print. We also have the option to export. Now this is running directly from the content item section. The next thing we need to do is we need to actually go through and put this on our site so that users can run it. So in the site builder section, we go into our manage sitemaps, and we need to create a site navigation item to be able to call this report. Again, they should look familiar because these are the same things that we're seeing over here on the actual public site. So here under Manage Sitemaps, I'm going to create a new website navigation item. And oops, my text is going to be December sample. Next, I need to actually find the content item to link to. So it's pretty simple at this point. All I need to do is create a content item and pick my content, save, and now this is the longest part of the process, publish. It takes a few seconds for this to publish. And we're waiting, and we're waiting. Okay, so now we can actually come back here and we can refresh this page, and you will see that we have a new item. So we can go into December sample. When we run the report, it pops up. So just in the span of, 10 minutes, I went from start to finish by uploading, configuring, and then setting up a page to be able to run this Crystal report. It is that simple to be able to save your reports and get them to display online. Now, there's a couple other little things I want to go over for those people that would actually be doing the detail work for uploading reports and things like that. Here in Crystal Reports Manager, you actually have the ability to go through and select multiple reports, and you have the option to download them. When you download them, they create something called a JSON file. This file can actually be downloaded from, for instance, development, and then it can be uploaded to production. When you do that, your reports are fully configured, so you don't have to go through and remap all those parameters. All you have to do is go through, so now I'm in production, and I pick upload, and it says, go ahead and find that file. Here's my file, open, upload. I complete my upload. It's telling me that there's 3 reports. I complete my import. Now, if I go down here, here are my 3 reports that I downloaded from development and I uploaded to production. The information that the reports use to be able to call the database is actually passed by RiSE itself, so you don't have to repoint anything, redirect anything, just like that. You have now gone from development, the safe environment where your reports were working, and you've uploaded them into production. Now from here, you could actually go through if you wanted to go farther and do download and upload your RiSE pages, your content items, and things like that, but that's more the RiSE site. If you found that, you know what, I don't need those reports, they're duplicates. All I have to do is click on this delete button and it's gone. I click on the delete button and it's gone. If I found, hey, that's a great report, but I need something a little different, then I can actually copy this report and then I can come in here and I can modify it, do whatever I need. Now that is Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE in a nutshell. It is a lot of information covered pretty quickly, but we don't want to take too much of your time and we want to show you this tool that we've made for everyone. I am going to pass this over to Sarah so that she can see about any questions or comments from anybody, and happy to answer anything you might have. Sarah, you still with me?
I am. I'm just trying to get back there. Are you able to see the
Yes.
PowerPoint again? Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Teresa. Just as we wrap up here, I promise just a couple slides, really 1 or 2, just to really refresh your memory of kind of what the real process is. I know Teresa went through really the meats and the good part of the presentation, but really the gist of it is that you're able to upload your reports to your Crystal Reports to RiSE. You're then able to insert ISG's Crystal Report Viewer iPart, and then you can run the reports and have fun. You can download or save or export, etc. So really great. And the introductory price at this point for the ISG Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE is only $300 per month, and it is available now. So for those of you that don't know me, I think I did mention at the beginning, I'm Sarah Scheinhorn. I'm an account executive here at ISG. I do see that I have at least 1 or 2 questions, so I will check that in 1 second. But in the event you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. You'll either be hearing from myself or my colleague, Megan Schenkel. I know many of you have worked with Megan in the past. So, or currently work with Megan. So you will be hearing from one of us to follow up. But if you have any questions that we don't cover today, please let us know. I've also recorded this presentation. So if you have any body that you'd like to see it, or we've got recordings, so please let us know. That would be easy as well. So it looks like we have a question here. Can we export the report from RiSE and edit it in Crystal? And Teresa, do you want to answer? I know the high level answer, but you might be able to go into a little more detail.
So yes, the answer is if you have a report in RiSE, you export it from RiSE, you do the modifications in Crystal, and then you re-import it to RiSE. RiSE does not, or the Crystal Reports Viewer for RiSE does not offer the ability to edit the reports. It's just a tool to run them and render them on a RiSE site.
Correct. Perfect, thank you. Looks like we've got another one. Oh, so what version of IMIS do you need to be on in order is compatible? So that would be IMIS 2017. So the Crystal Reports Viewer is compatible with IMIS 2017. Looks like we've got another question. Are you able to set a no upper bound parameter on a date field? Teresa,
that would be set on the Crystal side, I believe. So yes, you should be able to.
Wonderful. Any other questions? It looks like I've gotten a couple, answered those. Want to make sure we don't miss any. They come in quickly on Zoom, so I want to give it just a quick second. And I'm going to check here for any hands raised. I don't see any hands raised. So it looks like that's all the questions at this point. Again, as I mentioned, if you have any additional questions, we absolutely welcome them. And like I said, I'll be following up with either myself or my colleague Megan will be following up with you. So you can ask any questions at that point or feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the screen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate the time you shared with us, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you, Teresa, and happy Thursday, happy almost weekend, and happy holidays, everyone. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.